Hello, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Shanaz, and I'm joined by my colleague, Praneet Singh, who is the Associate Director for Study Abroad at upGrad. And we from upGrad are very thrilled to announce our partnership with International Fashion Academy in Paris, France. We are honored to have the CEO of the IFA Paris Group with us today, Jean-Baptiste. He has more than 15 years of experience in fashion and business academia across the globe. Jean-Baptiste, welcome.
Thank you, Shanaz. I'm very happy to be with you today.
So are we. We are very pleased. Well, today, all of you are joining this session to hear more about fashion, fashion careers, fashion opportunities. What we can see is that in the past few years, we can see that the creative industry in many countries is really growing and has become a significant contributor to the national economy. So what we are going to discuss today is the importance of studying creative art degrees such as fashion and how students can benefit from studying a fashion program that focuses on both fashion elements as well as the marketing and business principles. Now, I would like to hand it over to you, Jean-Baptiste.
All right. Well, so thank you very much for having me today. So as you were saying, Shanaz, just like a few words about my profile. It's true that I have actually more than 15 years, believe it or not, experience, because I don't update my LinkedIn profile, but I started working in academia in 2004. So I think we're clocking in 19 years of experience now. Doesn't make me any younger. But anyway, academia was not necessarily the field that I was supposed to be working in, because I'm a business school graduate, and I also have a double degree, an MBA actually from Thailand, from Thammasat University, more specifically from the Asian Institute of Technology. So I'm mentioning this because Asia for me was quite instrumental in driving my career towards academic, because that's where I started. I started in a network of schools called Raffles Education Corporation. So I worked in Bangkok, Singapore, then I worked in Shanghai as well. And that's how I started with IFA Paris as academic director in Shanghai, and then moved to Paris in 2015 as managing director for the Paris campus, and ultimately in 2021, CEO. So just to give a few words of presentation, perhaps, about IFA Paris. So we always say IFA Paris, but you're right. In your presentation, you introduced us as International Fashion Academy Paris. That's what IFA stands for. So IFA Paris is 41 years old now. We celebrated our 40th anniversary last year. It was started in 1982 by our two founders. One is French and the other one is Chinese. One is a man, Mr. Kusmin Karaviev, and the other one is a woman, Mrs. Chai. And so when they started this venture, it was really out of, I would say, love for each other, because they're a couple in real life as well, and love for fashion. So they really wanted to create a school, a fashion school, that had a different perspective in its pedagogical strategy, because they wanted the school to be international. So when they opened it in 1982, it was really the first fashion school that was delivering all its programs in English. Now, 40 years later, it's becoming, I would say, more common in Paris to have all the programs delivered in English. But back then, 40 years ago, it was quite a novelty. And so that's really what got us the opportunity to develop another particularity of our school, which is truly our international perspective, as we have, for example, on our Paris campus, more than 50 different nationalities that are combined in our different academic programs. And I'm also very happy to say that the first geographical cluster and the #1 nationality represented in Paris is actually India. So that's why for us, this partnership is very special. So Opened in 1982 in Paris, very soon the objective was also to develop internationally. And that's why in 2002, we opened our first campus in Shanghai. And that was the very first collaboration between a French academic institution and a Chinese academic institution. And to this day, it is one of the most, I would say, successful collaborations. And then in 2013, while we were developing some international partnerships with other schools. So at the time, we were working with Polimoda in Italy. Then we developed partnerships with two other institutions in Italy, such as Lorenzo di Medici and Accademia Italiana. In parallel, we opened our third campus, which is in Istanbul. So Paris, Istanbul, and Shanghai really gives the opportunity to our students to have really three different perspectives when it comes to fashion, and not only from a creative standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. So in Paris, we have more of a heritage-like background with, our history. And when I say our, is our French history in terms of couture. In Istanbul, it's a very interesting geographical location because it's at the crossroad between Europe and Asia, and they are really well known for their manufacturing of leather, for example. And Shanghai, which has become a powerhouse when it comes to fashion, has now also become one of the most important fashion capitals in the world. So to have these, I would say, geographical points covered is actually another unique selling proposition of IFA Paris, because the students can also move from one campus to another.
Yeah, so having visited the campus myself, I can definitely, attest to that. It's a very international environment that you experience at the campus. And we are just so happy to have you here and to have our pathway launching very soon. Praneeth, I would actually like to ask you if you can tell us a bit more about the pathway and the program, Bachelor in Fashion Marketing.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I welcome Jan. It is an absolute pleasure to be working with the school. I'm sure now that you heard about the school, you know that it comes to us with a long legacy and a good enough history, as very similar to the city itself. I am the Associate Director for University Partners Worldwide. I think one of the biggest celebration that we've had this year is to open up a new domain for our learners. For all of you who are familiar with what upGrad does, you know that with every single thing, with every single course that we bring on our platform, we're trying to make higher education across the world in some of the leading schools like the International Fashion Academy, more equitable, more accessible, more democratized for an Indian student, more easier, more flexible for them to start the degree in India and then finally move to France and contribute to the French economy. One of the biggest salient highlight of the partnership is that we're letting students start in India on campus with upGrad and then finally move to IFA to pursue their Bachelor of Fashion Marketing. I'll let Jan explain more about the course, but it's one of the most optimally OLS blended courses called Bachelor in Fashion Marketing, which gives you the best of both worlds. Fashion, of course, France is one of the big four capitals, London, Paris, New York, and Milan. So with a city like that, and fashion being the domain, and of course, you've got the business side to it. So which means ideally it's suitable for anyone who wants to be very much in fashion, has just graduated school, but wants to have or study the business side of things. So they can build their own label, they can market or contribute to the marketing subdomain for a big fashion house, Chloe, Dior, Chanel, and the list goes on and on and on. So long story short, I think we have been able to set up a wonderful and affordable academic partnership with IFA to start rolling out a course early July 2023. Feel free to use the Q&A button, ask Jan anything you want about IFA, about Paris, about the fashion weeks that happen. How much can you contribute? How much is it that is in store for you? One of the biggest, let's say, breakthroughs that we've had is students in India can actually go to France within 6 months. They don't actually have to spend a whole year. They can actually move right after 6 months, after one semester, and IFA will accept you for the next 2.5 years. That means, of course, you save costs, but that means you graduate school, study in India for 6 months, and out you go. So with that, I will pass the baton to Jan. Jan, Shanaz has tons of things that we'd love to ask you, but I think more importantly, it is to make students in India believe that fashion and design economy and the experience economy in this world in the next 5 years is going to go big. And especially when with the division of labor between human beings, machines, any creative side is what's going to lead the way for a human being to be more participative in, and all the jobs are in that field. I'll give the baton to Shanaz and yourself, and like I said, we're super thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, adding on to what Pranee just mentioned, we mentioned the term creative industries before, which includes advertising, marketing, architecture, fine arts, design, fashion, and a lot of other things too. Now, with this rise of the creative industry, we can also see an increasing interest of students choosing for courses in fashion, design, etc. Now, Jean-Baptiste, would you like to tell us a bit more about the creative industries in France and how studying a degree in Paris will help the student in, well, basically choosing a career after graduation that adds on to that creative industry?
Right. Well, so to answer your first question, when people think fashion, and this is also valid in France, they think of a frivolous industry, simply because, they tend to reduce fashion to only an outer look, so something that is quite superficial, and also because fashion is seasonal, and therefore the lifetime of a product is much shorter than in other industries. The general impression is that, like fashion is not a serious industry. And I would recommend to everybody that has this type of thought to actually look a little bit deeper into numbers, because in France, the fashion industry and all its related sub-industries, because earlier on, Shanaz, you were talking about architecture. So, there is a component of architecture within, a subset of the fashion industry. So if you look at the entire fashion industry, it's actually the second highest grossing industry in France. It produces more wealth than aircraft manufacturing and car manufacturing, two very important industry segments in France, combined. And obviously, when you look at I would say the power and the reach of French brands, and when you ask someone abroad what would be the top 3 French brands, top of mind, a bit of a top of mind exercise, they wouldn't tell you Renault, Peugeot, or perhaps Airbus, but then they will tell you Chanel, Dior, and Vuitton. So I think, this sets the scene actually to explain how the fashion industry is important. And there's been a lot of focus on us lately from, I would say, a sustainability standpoint. I mean, yes, it is true. Fashion is also the most polluting industry in the world. But then it also means that there is so much to do for young and emerging leaders that will be graduating in the next 3 years to actually change the industry and what fashion is all about. And so that's what we're trying to do with our various programs at IFA Paris, but more particularly with the Bachelor in Fashion Marketing. And I'm assuming we'll have time to talk about the Bachelor of Fashion Marketing afterwards, but I just wanted to mention that the way we look at fashion at IFA Paris is decidedly different from other fashion schools. Like, we have integrated fashion tech elements very early on into our programs. And so we ensure that all our students are proficient when it comes to creating customer experiences in the metaverse, for example, or understanding what machine learning is all about in order to program artificial intelligence. And I was mentioning earlier on about sustainability. Well, sustainability is integrated throughout our programs and throughout our school processes as well, and not just from a standpoint of optimizing natural resources or resources in general, but also in terms of how these young students are going to be able to be vectors of change in terms of increasing social cohesion as a whole and championing diversity and inclusivity. And so for us, that is very important, because through our research and through our monitoring of the fashion industry, we understand that these are extremely big issues and challenges that will need to be addressed.
Yes, thank you so much. And I really like that you mentioned sustainability, because this is something that you will see across different disciplines, across different fields. It's an upcoming discussion about indeed waste management, how to address certain environmental issues. And this is definitely something that you will also indeed see in the field of fashion. So what I can really see with IFA, and when I visited the campus, was that as part of the program, students really do focus, yes, on the fashion part, and in this particular program, also on the marketing principles.
Mm-hmm.
However, at the same time, they also focus on real life issues that are leading in politics, in society. And this helps students, of course, putting things in perspective, because it's real. Critical analysis, critical thinking are two concepts that students will be using quite often, analyzing what's happening around them. And I would like to ask Praneeth for his inputs on this.
I had a question. I mean, from a lot of years, at least the last 3 on, I've been seeing that a lot of US brands, like you said, are increasingly becoming conscious on the sort of carbon footprints they're leaving behind, on the sort of pollution or pollutants that they've been a large source of. And I think the fact that you brought us sustainability, and the fact that a lot of brands are now revamping, recalibrating the entire value chain or supply chain in a way that this is something that they can address, so that they enhance the kind of the kind of world we're trying to build. Why I especially got intrigued when you said that is, I think if a school in France can understand that and build that as a DNA, that this gets fabricated on a deep-rooted level in students, it's exactly what the market needs. And some, I'm sure they're always looking out, scanning for folks who understand this and who come from schools that where it's taught. That's a very amazing, excellent thing. Why I want to repeat this is for students to understand that when I was studying in the US, that is one of the major things that everybody's talking about, the UN is talking about. And there's a brand in the US called Patagonia, not just the first level supply chain, second and third level supply chain. They're making sure every single layer is sustainable. You mentioned, the other thing you mentioned, which I really want to ask, is you said a lot of fashion brands are going on metaverse. That means everything is going to be based on non-fungible tokens and blockchain, and you not only understand how to digitally transform an enterprise that was earlier operating on a brick and mortar setup, but like I said, recalibrating the entire fashion house or brand to ensure that they can fully relaunch themselves on a completely digital transactional format, but also build that universe for them. How does that blend into this degree? I really want to know that.
Well, as Shanaz was saying, we tend to develop a lot of what we call industry projects. So these are partnerships that we're building up with companies and brands. And, obviously at times we work with, quite big brands as well, such as Microsoft, for example, on the tech aspect. We did a collaboration with Microsoft and Guess actually last year that we're doing again this year. But we also like to work with relatively smaller startups. And the reason why we do that is because obviously we can give students more flexibility and also a better understanding of what it would be to become a fashion entrepreneur that specializes in the tech universe and, wanting to scale their business. So I think one of the projects that I really liked last year, for example, mixed sustainability and tech. And you were talking about NFTs earlier on. So we organized a clothing swap where we actually activated the entire community surrounding the school. So there was an element, obviously, of communication, of marketing. There was an element of upraising used clothes that were given to us as well. But there was also a tech element on which we have collaborated with a startup named Lablaco. And the tech element was that all the clothes were actually photographed, scanned, and transformed into an NFT, so to speak, that would actually go into the participant to this clothing swap digital purse. So you come, you give your clothes, they're evaluated, you have a certain amount of credit or euros that go into your purse. All the clothes are being digitally scanned into this NFT, so into this metaverse. And then the day of the clothing swap comes and you're coming over with your phone, you have your digital wallet, and you only have to scan the QR codes that the students generated that were attached to each piece of clothing in order to have the entire description of the piece of clothing, the traceability, and having the possibility to swap those clothes. And it was great because with this new tech as well, the students had the ability at the end of the clothing swap to understand how they managed to reduce their impact. So it told them exactly how many tons of CO2 they had actually contributed to save by organizing this clothing swap. So that was a great project because I feel also working with a startup teaches you to have a different type of MO, because sometimes as a student you're expecting things to be written down in a brief and everything being like absolutely square and falling into a framework. And obviously when you work with a startup, when they're constantly inventing new methods and and putting together new innovations, you have to adapt very quickly. So it teaches the students flexibility and agility, which are actually two very important soft skills to have, I believe, in the current job market.
Well, that's a great initiative. And well, since you mentioned this particular project, I remember you showed me how students can actually, students on campus can actually create some sort of avatar and basically choose the some particular designs before creating them, which also helps in, well, reducing waste in the first place. I think all of these are great initiatives. And apart from, we should definitely not forget, apart from the environmental principles that are part of sustainability, we definitely also have the social cultural side of sustainability. And I think
Yeah.
this is also something that students at your institution really, well, get a better perspective on by having such an international group of students in class. There is a very international classroom experience for students, and knowing about other students' countries and certain case studies and their perspectives and views on certain topics, that definitely helps in developing this, I would say, holistic perspective on fashion and on fashion marketing. Now, could you maybe tell us a bit more about the fashion marketing program itself?
Sure. Well, it's a program that is very dear to my heart because when I joined IFA Paris in Shanghai back in 2013, they didn't have a fashion marketing undergraduate program. So I developed it. And we launched it in Shanghai in 2014. We're now in 2023. So let's say almost 10 years later, the Bachelor of Fashion Marketing has overtaken, in terms of student population size, the Bachelor of Fashion Design and Technology, which is actually, our main program, let's say. So I'm very proud of it, and I believe it comes from the fact, and this is something that Praneet was saying, that you were saying, Shanaz, as well, that it's a program that perfectly blends two worlds, the business world and the creative world. So it's a program that is built over 3 years, a total of 180 ECTS, and each year a student validates 60 ECTS. So we have a pedagogical strategy, that is progressive, because in the first year, what we are expecting from the students is for them to, let's say, understand basic concepts and being able to utilize them. So in the first year, there is a mix between fashion business modules and fashion environment modules. So in the fashion business module, we have typical modules like marketing principles, consumer behavior, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And on the other side, on the more creative side, we have an entire series of modules that is called fashion thinking. So we created this series of modules because we felt that most of the students that were actually registering into this program were actually coming obviously from high schools, but they had very much a sort of business mindset. They had an interest in fashion, but they were not necessarily able to express their creative ideas. So in fashion thinking, the students are going through, the development of a collection from the inception, creation of mood boards, research in terms of trends, and then creation of an actual collection plan. So it's actually, as you were saying, quite a holistic teaching, and I would say a first year that is actually giving you insights on a lot of different areas of the marketing and the fashion industry, to allow you to move into the second year that is more about developing your critical thinking and autonomy. And so it's particularly in the second year that we have a very heavy strategy that is based on actual practical case studies. So I was talking earlier on about, a project that we did with Guess and Microsoft that was about improving customer experience in the context of a metaverse. We're doing it again this year. So Guess and Microsoft are actually bringing over 6 selected students from the program, all expenses paid, into Switzerland for an intense workshop for 3 days. We have a module called Fashion Enterprise Project. So this is the module where we develop the clothing swap I was mentioning earlier on. But I would say, generally speaking, this is a module where we give you the tool to understand what it would be like to become an entrepreneur in fashion. We have more strategic modules, strategic marketing, branding, and something that I haven't mentioned earlier on, and that is quite specific to us, is that we do not skimp, so to speak, on financial modules. So we teach students how to proficiently utilize Excel, to build a stock management system, financial projections, business plans. We have an important accounting module in the first year. We have finance and budget. We have statistics in the second year. And so with all of this sort of compounded knowledge and set of skills, the students move to the third year. And in the third year, they're building on the critical thinking and the autonomy that they have started to develop in the second year. And in the third year, they're really, I would say, masters of their own year, whereby they develop their own thesis for the third year, which is based on an exercise that is called developing a brand extension for an existing brand. And they also have their own internship, which is a 6-month internship. During the third year, the students also have the possibility to choose what we call the Fede track. So Fede is a Swiss NGO that is actually certifying and accrediting our school. And we have elaborated together with them an alternative pathway for the students that are registered in the Bachelor of Fashion Marketing. IFA Paris is a private higher education institution, right? And so what we wanted was to give the students the opportunity to have 2 different types of qualification. One would be from IFA Paris, that is very much a professional qualification with which they can apply for jobs. And I know that this is something that we're going to discuss later on. Or having a more academic qualification where their award would actually be benchmarked against an institution called France Compétences in France. France Compétences is attached to the Ministry of Labor, and they are certifying academic programs, which is exactly what is done in the context of the Fede track or this alternative path. So in the third year, our students can take 3 additional modules, a language module, which is very important, especially French, that we teach in first and second year if these students want to find a job in France. They have a module that is called intercultural management and a module called European project. By passing these 3 modules, they get 2 additional awards. They get the European Bachelor in Fashion Marketing from the Fede, which is an additional professional qualification, and they get a certification from France Compétences that is a level 6 certification. So level 6 corresponds to higher education level 6, which would be the equivalent of a bachelor qualification, degree qualification, if the students were actually following this program in a public institution.
Yes, thank you so much for explaining that. So now students basically, if they would opt for this Fede track, they would get 3 qualifications. Now, would you suggest students pick this Fede track? How often do they not opt for this Fede track in a final year?
I would say at the beginning, students were not necessarily interested in it because the students that are joining IFA are students that have usually a very specific professional project in mind, and they want a program that is training them to be able to integrate a professional context. So an award that has a more let's say, academic degree value was not very much of interest for them when we launched this track in 2019. But now, after the pandemic, with the uncertainty as well that is surrounding us worldwide, students like to have a sort of plan B in a way, which is definitely something that I can understand. And so just to give you some numbers, in 2019, when we started, we had about probably 12 students that registered for the Fede track. This year, we have 55 students that registered for the Fede track. So, and I think this trend is going to grow, and I really encourage the students to take this track because at least it gives them two potential choices. One, if they want to study in France or anywhere in the world with the IFA Paris credentials, they can. Or if they decide that they're not ready to integrate the professional world and they would like to continue with an academic progression, perhaps studying a master program at Sciences Po, maybe in Paris. I'm mentioning Sciences Po because it's a very reputable school and also a few of our students entered in their master program. Then with the option of this Fede track, they can do that. So I think it's smart, right? Because at least you have those two options and you're not going to get to the end of your third year and regret and saying like, oh my God, if only I had opted in for this Fede track. So I really encourage the students to do that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and please.
I was actually mentioning, I think the flexibility in the course where you're not only getting recognized as a level 6 qualification of a proper bachelor's degree, but the fact that you've got the Fede track to make your degree globally acclaimed and recognized. That means a lot. I think at this point in this world, I think when you're looking at a borderless transfer of students, and there's more mobility than there has ever been in the history for students moving to the US or Canada or the UK. Giving them that option to make their degree globally recognized is a very wise choice. And so I'd recommend, like Jon was mentioning, in recognition of history, he said that Fede track has now more students that opt for it than any time in the past. The Fede track with the 3 modules, like Jon mentioned, gives you that ability to learn French. And I think French is not only relevant in France, but is widely spoken elsewhere. When I was living in the US, I saw a lot of French speakers. More and more students in India are now studying French. And so, Jon, one of the things I want to know from you was, of course, moving into the Fede track and learning French. To what extent, in this context, in 2023, as I talk to you, how much is the likelihood of my success professionally if I still don't know French? Or, I mean, how important on a hygiene level is it still?
It's extremely important, especially if you want to secure a job in France. So, just to get back to the birth of IFA Paris 40 years ago, obviously it was a risky move to start teaching those programs in English, but it was also a calculated move because we know that English is the language of the fashion industry. However, and this is something that at times I feel students don't necessarily take into account, you have to analyze the cultural context because fashion is international, but fashion is very much French. And I'm not saying this because I'm being chauvinistic, but I'm basing myself on, historical tracks and, obviously developments and the power as well of French fashion brands throughout the world. So it is expected if you want to succeed in France as a foreign student that you need to have a command of the French language, whether you're talking about an internship or whether you're talking about securing a job after graduation. And you're right, Praneeth, in saying that there is more mobility and people are traveling more often across the world, but also in parallel, there is also more of a trend of locking up professional opportunities and making it not more difficult, but perhaps more challenging to get to, let's say, a working visa, for example, for foreigners that would be working in France, or even French people that would want to work abroad in the US, for example. So, and one of the conditions really to be able to secure a working visa in France is to have a command of the local language.
That brings me to the next thing. I think right before you joined, Shanaz and I were talking about what really happens if I'm a student at IFA, I complete my degree in BFM, and and I'm able to secure a good job. So I have a twofold thing to ask. So number one is, how does IFA support me through the third year in helping me find the right internship or the right placement for me to serve the French economy or the French market? And two, how does the working visa structure work? Like, you made it very clear that French, what level of French would I need? And would students in the 2.5 years when they're still with IFA, would they have sufficient time to learn French?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to address your first question. In terms of professional opportunities, what we do is that we create for all the students on Microsoft Teams a channel where every time we receive internship opportunities or job opportunities, we communicate them to the students. And so our students in the Bachelor of Fashion Marketing, obviously, they have a 6-month internship that they need to validate in their third year because it's attached to credits, but they can also do internships throughout their first and second year, especially during 2 entire fashion weeks. I'm sorry, as we block off those slots specifically for them to get those short-term internships. They can also do internships during their summer as well. And we support them in their professional development by having modules in personal coaching and personal development. So really the objective here is, to make them understand what could be their path, how can they achieve their professional objectives, and obviously feeding them with professional opportunities that we receive. But we let the students being very autonomous on this. I mean, currently in Paris, we have about 550 students. So I can't place all of them individually with my contacts, obviously. And also, I think it's very important to push them to, again, be autonomous in their job application and do the best they can by themselves. So that's the first part. The second part, to answer your second question, in terms of work visa, I think in France, we have a very similar system as you would find in the US or in other countries. Let's say I'm a company that wants to hire you, Praneet. So first of all, I need to show that I posted a job ad to fill your job or the job that you covet, and that I have interviewed during this 1 month local candidates, French candidates. And I need to say that unfortunately, none of them were meeting all the different criteria that I had for this job. So that's what I'm saying. But here I have a candidate, Praneet, right? He graduated from a French fashion school. He's an Indian national. He has an amazing command of English and other languages. So I want to sponsor his work visa. Okay, so first we have to formalize this request with a national agency that is called Direct. And then to this national agency, I have to send your CV, your credentials. I have to show that I have interviewed French nationals. None of them were a good fit. And then the director is going to tell me, okay, fine, you're allowed to hire Praneet. So that's when we move to the visa procedure aspect. And so a visa procedure involves me as a company sponsoring your visa. So I need to pay as a first-time fee 50% of 1 monthly salary for you to sponsor your visa. And then I need to provide all the different documents for you to be able to have this working visa. So it's a long process, granted, but throughout this process, the candidate can work, right, while he's waiting for his working visa to be processed.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's very much in line with what happens in the US, 100%, 100%. Which is called the H-1B, that you've got to prove that you're especially skilled and no one else could be found as a but you. So I get that part. So you're saying it takes about 6 months, and the candidate, while all of this is going on, can still work as long as all
Yes,
going on in the background.
as long as the process is ongoing, yes.
Got that. And just want to know from you, you said 50% of the salary. That meant what? So what I'm going to earn in 1 month as per my labor contract has to be pledged by who? My employer.
By the company, yes, your employer.
When you say pledge, that means, I mean, what really? So they have
paid. They have to pay. So basically, this is the cost of the visa sponsoring. So imagine your salary will be 3,000 euros. As an employer, to sponsor your visa, I need to pay 1,500 euros.
Got that. And while we're on that topic, what are some of the average salaries that your grads actually get in this industry with this kind of a degree with best of both the worlds?
I mean, I was mentioning 3,000 euros precisely because that would be actually, I think, the median salary that we would have if we counted really the graduates that are currently working in Europe, in the US, or in North America in general. Obviously, we do have graduates throughout the world, but as you know, the salary scales, for example, in certain countries in South America or in certain countries in Southeast Asia, are lower because the standards of living are also lower. But I would say a median number would be 3,000 euros gross.
Got that. And while we're still on that, I just want to know, how much does it cost to earn a degree of BFM from IFA, and what's the annual cost, Jean?
Yeah, so the yearly tuition fees are 9,400 euros. And on top of those 9,400 euros, we have something called resource fees that are a yearly 400 euro fee. So earlier on, Shinaz, for example, was saying that, she was impressed by the fact that the students can actually create their avatar and so on. So these 400 euro fees go to maintain and ensure that we can upgrade and improve our fashion tech lab that is 400 square meters, totally equipped with body scanners, 3D printers, Oculus Quests. I understand that 9,800 euros, because it's 9,400 plus 400 euros, could seem like, quite a big sum. But I think it's very important to stress that IFA Paris is actually one of the most affordable French fashion schools. And, I don't call them our competitors, I call them our colleagues. But, schools like Esmond and Marangoni are, for example, 14,000 euros per year and upwards of that number.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I know about those two, and I know they're hefty with terms of their fee. One of the things that I want to know, and a couple of students asked here, was scholarships. And some of the students are assuming or have heard that IFA's weekly routine for students is very rigorous and challenges each student, which for me is academic rigor, and I love that. But we'd love to hear more about it from you.
Yes. All right. So let's talk about the scholarships and financial aid first. We have two types of support, right? We have scholarships, and for us, these are academic scholarships in the sense that they reward students with outstanding academic performances. So we have 100% scholarship per year for each program that we run, and we have what we call an excellence scholarship and a distinction scholarship. These three scholarships, they are actually benchmarked against GPA. So someone that is applying for a 100% scholarship would need a minimum of a 3.8 out of 4 GPA. Someone who is applying for an excellence scholarship, which is a 40% reduction in tuition fees, would need to have a 3.5 out of 4 minimum GPA. And someone who applies for a distinction scholarship, which is 20% reduction, would need to have a minimum of 3.0 out of 4 GPA. The good thing about the excellence scholarship at 40% and the distinction scholarship at 20% is that they're not limited in numbers. We're really about, seeing, if we have like excellent academic profiles, we want to have those students integrating the school. So that's the scholarship. And then you have the financial aid. Financial aid is a little bit different in the sense that we don't necessarily focus on academic performance. Obviously, you have to meet minimum criteria, but we look more into the financial situation of the student, the parents, or the sponsors. There are students that want to study fashion marketing, and unfortunately, their parents don't necessarily have the means to help them. So we have put together financial aids for them. We have a 40% financial aid, 30% financial aid, 20% financial aid. And so again, these are not limited in numbers. What we require from the candidates is for them to tell us about their financial situation. So we ask them to construct a yearly budget for us. They obviously need to submit official documents in terms of, for example, tax returns or tax forms, declarations from the parents, so that we understand what is their financial situation. And just to stay on this for a sec, I also want to mention to the participants to this call that when you become an IFA Paris student, we would like to keep you as a student and to make sure that we can see you evolve through time and through the different levels. So if you join as a Bachelor of Fashion Marketing student and you graduate and you want to continue on to your postgraduate program, as an IFA Paris student, you get an automatic 30% reduction as well. Now, Praneet, you were saying something about rigor, right? Can you tell me your question again, please?
So we had a student here who said, one of my friends studies at IFA, and I was told that it's extremely stressful, he called. And I told him, hey, it's called rigor, my friend. But I just want to know, how does how does a week in the life of an IFA student look like? And how would you describe it in terms of rigor? And in your understanding, also give us a good rationale as to how have you guys designed that and why is it that rigorous?
Yeah, it's a packed week. I'm not going to lie. Students have between 24 and 27 hours of classes per week. And these are classes. It doesn't include their workload at home. So why are the weeks packed like that? I wouldn't say it's specific to IFA Paris, to be honest. It's pretty much a standard that you would see in a bachelor program. And in first year, you are more on a 27-hour per week workload. Then on the second year, you would be closer to 24. And obviously, in the third year, it's much less because you're in autonomy when you develop your final year thesis and you do your internship. We have two different types of assignments in this Bachelor of Fashion Marketing. We have your usual, let's say, run-of-the-mill exams. And for that, we have 2 weeks that are dedicated at the end of each semester for these exams. And this also is very typical of universities. And then we have projects. And so I think what usually surprises students, and that's why they may find it stressful at first, is that they are coming from high school. Most of them have not necessarily gone through, let's say, an IB program where they're used to do projects in IB program. In high school, you're just doing like, your typical exams and that's it. And then you start your first year of Bachelor and you have projects, you have reports that you need to do in groups. So again, you have human elements that come into play, but there are learning curves as well for the students. For example, how to manage group dynamics. You can't go to the teacher and say, oh, this one is not working, this one is never connecting to our calls. You have to work it out, as you will need to work it out when you graduate, by the way, in 3 years, because I don't think anybody would go to their boss and just say, oh, this colleague is slacking off. No, you need to work it out. Time management as well is extremely important. I think that's what catches students by surprise most of the time in their first year, because we tell them about their projects on the first week of class for, I would say, 80% of the project. And then the students, instead of building up a calendar and a way to manage their time, they tend to leave everything for the end of the term. And obviously, everything piles up all of a sudden, and that's how you get stressed out. But again, this is a great skill that you need to learn for your future career, in the sense that your boss is just going to tell you, I need this report by the 23rd of March. They're not going to tell you, are you going to be okay meeting this deadline? Are you sure? Would you need an additional 2 weeks? So I think that's where the toughness comes into play, and the rigor as well, because all the academic staff, the management, and the lecturers are consummate professionals. And really, their objective is not necessarily to, it's going to sound harsh, but it's not to babysit students, but it's really to introduce them to what really their life is going to be like in 3 years when they graduate.
I think that's most important because, as you mentioned, life after graduation, if you're already prepared for it during your studies, you are prepared and you know what to expect when you will actually be in the field.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to quickly ask you a bit more about the living cost in Paris and student accommodation options. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So earlier on, Pranit was asking me about the fees. Built in the fees, we have a concierge service that is called Fil Français. So Fil Français is helping students applying for their visas, opening their bank account, getting their Metro cards. And they also have a service where they can help the students finding accommodations. Now, I know when the students come to Paris, especially American students, they are expecting massive campuses with huge dormitories like in the US. But just as a sidebar, this is also perhaps why 1 year in the US is 54,000 euros and it's 9,400 euros in Paris, at IFA Paris. But parenthesis closed. So they're a little bit surprised. And it's very rare for a private school to have dormitories, but we do offer this service through Fil Français. And Fil Français has a range of partners that would go from university residence partner to apartment hotels to actual proper apartments. And if you're asking me about living cost, I would say if you want to live like a student, then most probably your rental would be 700 euros per month, I would say, for a studio apartment, not far from the school. And I know also that students like to share apartments as well. And so the cost can decrease. But obviously, this cost can go up, and sky is the limit at the end of the day. But the typical I would say rental costs would be 700 euros per month. And then obviously you have food as well. So again, it really depends on you. Are you going to cook at home, or are you going to eat out all the time? I mean, we do have a lot of students that are coming from Asia Pacific. I lived in various Asian countries as well. And I remember when I used to live in Thailand, for example, I seldom cooked. I would always eat out because the food is cheap, but it is not the case in Paris. So if you decide to cook for yourself, then I would say a budget of 100 euros for your grocery shopping per week would actually be a good budget. Mobile phone budget, you have very good mobile phone plans for 19 euros that allow you to call a lot of different countries included in that price. Internet at home as well would be around 20 to 30 euros per month. Transportation cost, I would have to check with Fil Français, but I believe the monthly metro card with a student rate would be between 50 to 60 euros, but then it's unlimited tram, metro, regional trains within the Parisian region, and buses, basically. So, you can actually, I think you can actually get a good deal out of living in Paris if you are frugal and if you realize you're here as a student, not as a tourist.
I think it's all worth it.
I mean, in Europe, I think when we look at Germany, especially the German government itself endorses about close to 1,000 euros now as living costs. And I think that way, more students have that affinity towards Germany. I think you brought out a clear contrast between how affordable France is, and yet gives you more or less the same salary figure as the German economy would for a fresh grad. We've got a few things beyond that. I'm just going to pick up with you, and then I'll pass the baton to Shanaz. I know in the best interest of time, I don't want to keep you hanging. We're almost way beyond the time, but so this is how much scope of this, what I'll do is I'll rephrase what he's asked. He just wants to know the scope of the course, and you answer the length. It's 3 years. Fee structure is 9,800 euros a year. Placement by internship is what Jon already has been speaking about. The affiliation of the course is what Jon said. The Fede track helps you get to an even advanced stage. Is this course online or offline? It's fully offline, 6 months in India, 2.5 years at IFA. In India, you study at the upGrad campus in Mumbai. When you're in France, you of course go to the IFA campus. One of the things that, Jan, I'd like to ask you, you were explaining to us about year-on-year sequential modules that you've built. I want to know that, look, so fashion itself has a lot of subdomains. You've got fashion curation, forecasting, design, marketing. Apart from the business side of things that you said, finance, business, the global positioning, supply chain, operations that you cover in the first year, how much of fashion design, how much of fashion forecasting, how much of fashion curation, how much of real-time fashion exposure is actually given to them beyond the internship? So, how much depth do we have when they do the fashion part of things and fashion marketing?
I would say the Bachelor Fashion Marketing program is a very balanced program. And, if I were to give you a proportion, I would say 50% of the structure very much focuses on business essentials, and 50% of the structure actually focuses on fashion itself. So if I look at the structure of the first year, for example, in the fashion environment module grouping, I was telling you about fashion thinking, but the students also go through a module called garment typology, for example. So they get to understand what are the different types of colors, what are the different types of shirts, what are the different types of jackets. They do product development and technical packs as well within the graphic design module. So technical packs are forms that are usually passed from the design department and the production department back and forth to actually finalize the characteristics of a product. So this is something that they get to learn as well. They get to learn about the history and the culture. So they have contemporary fashion history. They have a module called fashion news and fashion culture, because it's very important, especially for our students that are coming from abroad, to all have a common basis, let's say, when it comes to understanding fashion. They have modules in textile technology. They have modules in terms of garment production and quality. So it's very balanced.
Great, which is great to know. Shanaz, I'll leave that to you. One of the things that we gotta definitely tell if everybody who's with us is how do you sign up? So the course goes live at the end of the next week, so you can expect it by Friday next week or Monday. We'll open up the admissions. Of course, we know a lot of you would be in the outgoing grade 12th and should be able to clear out your exams this year, but you can still sign up in advance. Jan, one of the things I want to know from you is, do you accept gap years? So if someone graduated last year from 12th or the year prior, what's the limit at which you can accept students?
Yeah, we do actually. I mean, as long as they meet the minimum admission requirements, which are, high school certification and an IELTS 5.5 in terms of, I would say, minimum admission criteria. If a student has done a gap year before, all the better. At least it shows that the student perhaps wanted to travel throughout the world to perfect their knowledge of different cultures, or maybe they worked. So it always makes the profile more interesting.
Perfect. I think I've got all the answers I wanted. I'm going to go to Shanaz.
Yes, I just had one question, which is no portfolio is required for this particular program. So actually more of a question. It was more of a comment that I wanted to make, since some of the attendees had queries about this. What if I don't have a fashion or creative art component in my high school curriculum? That's okay. You can still apply as long as you meet the minimum eligibility criteria that Jean-Baptiste just mentioned, which is English level qualification, and of course, completing your high school degree. But no portfolio is required for this Bachelor in Fashion Marketing program. So I just wanted to clear that out. And then I think we've probably covered all the queries. Is there anything else that you would like to mention at this point, Jean-Baptiste?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I would, I'm just arching back to, the question that Praneet reported from a student, and she's saying, oh, I think it is stressful and it is difficult. And I realize that, but, life is not easy. And I think if you set on a path for your future, with your main objective thinking, I want to take it easy, you might miss out on a lot of opportunities. And, not only when it comes to your professional background, but also through your personal growth. I feel, personally, I have gone through, challenges, for example, when it came to my studies, when it came to my professional life. And this is really what allowed me to grow and what allowed me to get to where I am today. So I think the best outlook to have when you choose a school, whether it is IFA Paris or it is another school, is not to have a starting thought based on whether it's going to be easygoing or if it's going to be stressful, but rather just look at the program and make sure that it's you, that it corresponds to you, you know, and that it's going to help you as a tool fulfill your dreams and fulfill your wishes. I mean, that would be my parting word, if I may. I guess I did.
Perfect. Yes.
Hope I'm still here to hear you out. But on that, I think I 100% agree. I think, like Shanaz was mentioning, life outside school sometimes gets very stressful, gets rigorous. And sometimes it's not about stress. It's just what perspective do you have towards rigor? What perspective do you have towards things that you have to meet in a tight time frame? And I think some things are just very urgent, very important, and you just need to deliver because these are time-bound things that clients need from you. And I think sometimes these things are more sought after. Sometimes these things are more paid for. But I think also on a human capital level, the more brilliant, the more capability driven, the more skilled you are, the lesser time you take to deliver that kind of an output. And so when your school prepares you for it, when the school gears you up for it, I think that's a very foundational start to how much easy they make for you to cope up in the kind of world where we're not just competing with human beings, but with machine learning, with AI, right? And so
that is correct. That is correct. And you know, that's how I've been taught personally, you know, throughout my academic programs. And that's what we are trying to instill as well in the academic programs of IFA Paris, because yeah, you're talking about competing with machines, but even just competing with individuals, right? I was just saying that we have more than 50 nationalities represented on campus. But so it means that when you're applying for a job, even when you're applying for a job in Paris, you're not just competing against French people, you're competing against very qualified Indian candidates and candidates from Nigeria, South Africa, Argentina, America, Canada. So it's really, you know, we're not in the business of frustrating students. We're in the business of confronting them to what their reality is going to be.
And I think that's all that matters. When you do this degree or any other degree, you want to be successful once you're actually joining any organization, studio, company. So this is quite important, I would say, and I definitely agree with that. Well, I think this is pretty much it. I would like to thank you, Jean-Baptiste, so much for joining today. I would like to thank you too, Praneet, for asking these very relevant questions. And well, we will be live very soon. So the program pathway will be on our website very soon. If you have any questions, please do reach out to us, and we are more than happy to help you out.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Jan,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.